Hello everybody, this is Rory. I'm back again with another screencast on Windows Mobile development. So far we have, assuming you've been watching the other ones, we've looked at how to create a simple Windows Mobile application. And then we looked at how to create a simple networked Windows Mobile application. And this time we're moving on to something that's really pretty neat. And I say that all the time just because, honestly, like everything in the Windows Mobile world just floors me. What's been done over the past year or two. I mean, it floored me 5 years ago, but what's being done now is just, it's incredible. We're going to be looking at how to create a SQL Server Mobile-driven data-aware application for Windows Mobile device. And it's pretty incredible. Again, I consider it to be level 200 because a lot of the concepts that we're going to be seeing here are similar to concepts we've already seen on the desktop. And so it's not so much that we need to learn like a whole new way of doing things. We just need to learn how to adjust to the way that they're done through Windows Mobile. Okay, so it shouldn't be too complicated. SQL Server Mobile is an interesting little animal, and it is really little. It's very, very small. In fact, what I like to do is I like to call it SQL Server for your PDA or your phone. When I give this talk live, I usually hold up a phone, one of the little candy bar editions. I use an iMate SP5, and I say, yeah, that's right, I can install SQL Server on this thing. And half the room, just kind of laughs like, oh, this guy's kidding. And then the other half of the room, realizing I'm not joking, just sits and stares in wide-eyed bewilderment. And it's because it really is, it's mind-blowing, right? It's of course not as fully featured as SQL Server on the desktop. That'd be just ridiculous. But for a version of SQL Server that runs on a device as small as a phone, you're gonna have a tough time beating it. It's incredible. It is single-threaded, which means that the idea is not that you're going to install SQL Server on your phone and then create like a cluster of smartphones and set those up in your server room and try to run your entire company off of them. The idea, rather, is to provide a nice local repository for data on your Windows Mobile device. And so it works out pretty well there. Now, of course, if you're totally crazy and you got too much time on your hands, you could write a front end so that many clients could connect to SQL Server, and with some aggressive caching, you could probably make it possible for people to connect, several at a time. I don't recommend this because A, it's stupid, B, it's pointless, and C, I actually don't need a C after A and B. The product ships with VS 2005, or at least as far as I can tell. If not, you can actually just go out and download it. Do a web search for SQL Server Mobile, and you'll get to the download. And finally, and we'll be looking at this in a later pair of screencasts, it can be used to sync with a full-blown SQL Server instance. Okay, so the data doesn't just have to sit locally on your phone. You can actually pull data from a SQL Server instance, use it on your phone or on your PDA or what have you, and then push it back out to that SQL Server instance. Like I said, we're not going to be doing that in this demo. This demo is just to familiarize you with SQL Server Mobile. The synchronization is going to be coming in a couple later screencasts. And with that, we're just going to get started. So I'm going to head over to Visual Studio 2005, and I'm going to go up to File. And this is the same thing I've been doing in every single other screencast so far. I just go to File, New Project, and I create a new Windows Mobile 5.0 Pocket PC device application. By now, if you've been watching and paying attention, you ought to be pretty familiar with this. And I'm going to call this one Channel 9 Data Demo. I'll hit OK. So we will wait a moment for everything to kind of get established here. And there we go. Now, if you recall from the earlier screencasts, let's see, I'd actually like that to auto-hide. I'm working with an iMate Jazz Jar right now, which I have connected to via an application called SOTI Pocket Controller Professional. This is my actual device, and this is where we're going to be deploying the application. And because this device runs in landscape mode and because it's high-res, I'm going to change a couple aspects of this form here. So I'm going to right-click on it, once I can select it anyway. Looks like there we go. I'm going to rotate it to the left so we're in landscape mode. I'm going to get rid of the skin so I can see what I'm doing. Then finally I'm going to select the form, go down to Properties, and I am going to select a different form factor, which is the Pocket PC Phone VGA form factor. So we get all that real estate there. And then I'm going to head over to the Solution Explorer. I'm going to rename form1.cs to main form. And that's just about it. I'll head back to my form and I'll add a nice little title for it. So I'll call this Channel 9 Data Demo. And that's about all we're going to do with that form right there for right now. So before we can really do anything, I do need to have a data source that I can connect to. And in order to do that, I'm going to head over here to my Server Explorer. And I'm going to right-click on Data Connections, and I'm going to put in Add Connection. And as you can see, my data source right now is set to Microsoft SQL Server Mobile Edition. If you hit Change, you get the list of the different data providers that you can use. And of course, since I want to write a SQL Server Mobile-based application, I'm going to use the Microsoft SQL Server Mobile Edition provider. So I hit OK, and I can choose where I want the data source to come from. I might want it to exist locally on this computer, or I might want to pull it from an ActiveSync connected device. An example of an ActiveSync connected device is my IMA Jazz jar. It's sitting out there, it's connected via ActiveSync. If there's a Windows Mobile database that's already out there, or a SQL Server database I should say, then I could pull it off of the device and import it into my project locally. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to create a new database just so that you see how it works here. So I'll just call it Channel 9 DB. And if I wanted, I could check to overwrite the existing database file, but it's not already out there, so I'm not going to do that. I could encrypt the database if I wanted to. I could provide a password if I wanted to do that. I'm not going to password protect it. I'm going to make life easy on myself here. It's going to complain, about me not using a password, but whatever. I don't care. So I'm going to hit yes, that I would like to continue without putting in a password. Then I'm going to test the connection, make sure that it works. Test connection succeeded, and then I'm going to hit OK. So now we have this new connection here, which is a SQL Server Mobile connection. Okay, so I'm actually just about ready to use this, except that, of course, I need to provide a table, at least one table, so that I can pull some data, manipulate some data. So I'm going to right-click on Tables and hit Create Table, and we get this nice little designer that runs right here in Visual Studio for us, so we don't have to go to another tool. And I'll just call this customers. That's like the archetypical table that people always use when we're doing data demos. And I'll have a column here called first name, and you'll notice that it defaults to nvarchar. And you're not going to find a varchar type, and the reason is Windows Mobile is a Unicode operating system, and nvarchar is the Unicode version of varchar. So you're just going to find that Unicode is pervasive, used throughout, and you'll be using the N type data types throughout. So then we'll put in a last name as well, and that'll also be an nvarchar, and then maybe we'll put in something like I don't know, the country the person lives in, also nvarchar, and then finally an ID. And here we can use a unique identifier. Obviously we don't want to allow nulls, and this is the primary key. Now I can actually specify for the default value new ID, just like I would on the desktop. With the main problem being that new ID doesn't actually work in the SQL Server Mobile engine. When new ID gets called, or when there's an attempt to call new ID, nothing actually happens. We have to create the GUID ourselves when the record is being created. It's not going to happen for us. So that's a little unfortunate, but this is it's still a pretty impressive package for what it is. So I'm going to hit OK, and the table has been created. And now I'm going to open the table, and I'll add some records just so we have a few to see when they head out there. Actually, I can't really do this quite yet because I don't have any simple way of generating GUIDs, or GUIDs, however you like to pronounce them. But you do get to see the schemas here, and this is what it's going to be like on the device. So what I want to do next is I want to head up here to Data and show my data sources. And I'm going to add a new data source to the project. And this is pretty neat. We're working with a Windows Mobile application, but I can still choose either a database, a web service, or an object as my data source, which means that I can bind to pretty much any one of these. I think that's fantastic. I'm going to be using a database, as you may have figured out, since I just went through all the trouble to create one. And it's going to be the SQL Server Mobile database that I created just a moment ago. And now I will hit Next. And Visual Studio is asking me if I would like this database file to be made part of the project. And the reason is it's a file that just exists out on my hard drive right now somewhere. And if I don't make it part of the project, then the database is not going to get deployed when I deploy my application. I would really like to have the database file deployed when I deploy the application so that it works, because there's really nothing more embarrassing during a demo than having everything break. So I am going to opt to have the database file deployed with the application. So I'll hit yes. And it's going to ask me what data I want to bring back, and I want to bring back the customers table. So I'm going to hit finish. And there we go. And I can actually just grab the customers table, drag it out here onto my form, and without having to do any real work myself, you see I already have I have a binding source set for this table. I've got a data set. I've got a table adapter. A lot of the conveniences we've expected from the desktop are actually, surprisingly enough, here on the device. And the next thing I'm going to do with the grid selected is I'm going to go down to Properties and set its dock to fill so that it takes up the entire screen. And this is where things get pretty neat, right? What's happened so far to me is already pretty cool. What happens next when I click on this little dealie right here, and I work for the company, and I don't know what these are called. I still call them magic triangles. They're called like smart boxes or smart tags or smart thingies. I don't know what they are. I call it the magic triangle. I'm going to click on this, all right, and I'm going to click on Generate Data Forms. So I hang out for a moment while behind the scenes Visual Studio goes through this process and does all this work for me so that I don't have to do it. And what it's doing is it's creating forms, and if we look at Solution Explorer now, we can see that it's all done. Several new things have been created for us. We have a customer's edit view dialog. So if we happen to select a record in the customers table and we want to drill down, we can actually view it here with this form. Same thing with the summary view. So we have the details view set up for the grid that we just dropped out on the form, and we haven't had to do any little bit of coding yet. And if I double click on the edit view dialog form, what we get is there we go. I'm going to make a couple modifications here. Now it might look a little strange. It was auto-generated, so you can expect things to be a little odd. What's kind of neat about this, though, is that in the auto-generation process, these different controls were all set up using docking, okay? Which means that I'm not going to have to modify anything for the different form factors I'm using. Like the device that I'm using right now is in landscape mode, so if I wanted to rotate this sucker to the left, you'll see that the controls actually adapted, okay, because they're docked to the form, so the width is just going to automatically adjust. And that's pretty neat. So this is if we just want to see the record. Now, my personal feeling on the matter is that there's some editing that has to be done even after the forms have been auto-generated. And I think that customers really don't need to see the ID for a record. That's my opinion. There's just no reason for them to see it. What are they going to do with it? Nothing. So I just set visible to false for the ID field. And now we head back over to the Solution Explorer and we select the Summary View dialog. And we can do pretty much the same thing here, where we can select TD as well as the other label that's associated with it and set them both to visible to false. Users have no reason to be seeing GUIDs. It's just not going to do them any good at all. Okay, so after we have set the visible property to false, there's actually still something left that we need to do. And let's see, once I can actually deselect that control there, I'm going to rotate to the left and get rid of the skin, just so that I can get this looking how I want it to. And I'll head back over to the Solution Explorer, and I will open up the Edit View dialog one more time. Now, in looking at the Edit View dialog, you might recall earlier that I said the new ID function doesn't work for SQL Server Mobile. And what this means is that when a new record is being created, we're going to have to do a little bit of work here, just a tiny, tiniest bit of work. And that is to manually create the GUID ourselves. That's going to be inserted into the database with our record. So what I'm going to do is I select the form here, and I go down to Properties, and I'm going to handle the form load event. So what I'm going to do is first check to see if there is already a GUID in the ID field. And if there is, then it means that we're editing a record, and I don't actually want to put a new GUID in. So I'm going to say if ID textbox.text.length is smaller than 1, then we're simply going to say ID textbox.text equals GUID.newGUID.toString. That's it. That's all we have to do to ensure that a GUID is going to get entered into the database. So if there isn't already one there, it's going to get put in for us. And at this point, let's see if we can build and run this thing. Looks like the build succeeded, which means that we ought to be able to deploy and run this application and hopefully have it work. So I'm going to hit the debug button up here. I'm going to start. I'll head out over to Pocket Controller, and we will wait a moment for the application to get deployed, and we'll wait again for it to start up. And there we go. So we have our various columns up there in our data grid. I'm going to hit New so that I can create a new record. And then I'll just put in my own name just for fun, if I could spell it. And then country, USA. Hit OK. Record has been inserted. I can click on it so that I can get to a details page. And as you can see, you might have to do a little bit of work on your own to make sure that all the controls are going to line up properly. I've been programming for a little bit too long, but for the most part, everything pretty much works. So it's not terribly difficult to create a data-driven application using SQL Server Mobile. I guess you just have to be used to a few little things like there's different wizards involved. You have some constraints on the database just because it's not the full-blown version of SQL Server, things like that. But aside from that, it's really pretty easy to work with, and we have many more conveniences than I think you might normally expect, given what we're really working with here, which is a version of a database engine that runs on, if you want to, a phone, right? So it's completely crazy. I'm going to head back over here to the slideshow. As usual, if you have any questions, email me at roryb@microsoft.com. And in the next 2 sessions, what we're going to be doing is looking at remote data access, or RDA. And there really isn't a whole lot about RDA on the web, so I feel like that's going to be some of the most important stuff that I'm going to be showing in these screencasts. And it's going to be a 2-part screencast. The first part showing you just how to set up RDA, because that alone is probably the most difficult part. And then the second part of the screencast is going to be or part B of the screencast is going to be how to actually use RDA to pull and push data from and to a SQL Server instance between a mobile device and that SQL Server instance. So it ought to be pretty good. Anyway, thanks for watching again.